So we are live, and I would like for all of you to do your part to help this class grow. We're going to have some incredible conversation with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, and we're going to talk about the important molecule in food. And so let me start the record button here, and then we'll get started early because we need to end early today. And I'll explain that once we get started. Here we go. Okay, Robert. No. Now I get to introduce, now that we did the recording for the podcast, now I get to reintroduce you before we do the dance and everything. But today in the classroom, we're going to start a little earlier and end a little earlier. There's not going to be a teacher's pet corner because I've got an appointment that I need to go to. So we're going to be stopping at 5 till 1 my time. But today we're going to be talking about the important molecule, or should I say the unimportant molecule that in food that we need to become aware of. So fasten your seatbelt because it's time to learn and grow together. Here we go. It's time to dance, Dr. Pizzorno.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be. I'll be right here, right here. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for you.
This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning into the classroom for the first time, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. As you know, we've talked about becoming your own MD, your own medical detective. And there's certain things that are happening to your body and you can't figure out what's going on. Your doctor says it's all in your head, or maybe you're not really sick, but you're feeling sick and you know something is wrong, but nobody can find it. So what could be making you sick? Could it be your food? Could it be the chemicals in the food? Could it be this molecule that Dr. Pizzorno is going to talk about before we talk about the unimportant molecules in our food that have been kind of like put aside that we may be needing. So Dr. Pizzorno, the author of many books, but the Toxin Solution is what we have here. But now I'm going to look at another book that's called the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine. I'm going to check that one out today. But we're going to be talking about what's happening to our food where there are molecules that are considered unimportant. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Dr. Joseph Pizzorno is here to do just that. Welcome, Dr. Pizzorno, to the classroom.
Hello, Lily. Delighted to be here with you in your educational program.
Well, hey, it's because of teachers like you that the classroom is educational. And so I want to thank you for making me aware of that there's an issue. Explain about this unimportant molecule that is in our food. Share a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's going to take me a moment to set it up so you can kind of see what happened. Most of the research determining what components of food were important for life was done about 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, they were limited by the technology that was available, as well as by our understanding of physiology. I mean, now we know a lot now. 100 years ago, we were just starting to discover physiology. So the researchers looking at food were pretty much limited. So basically, they were doing animal studies, and the primary measure that they had was, did the animal live or die? Okay, did something serious happen? So they were looking at what minerals in food, what molecules in food were necessary for animals to live. And so they went through this process. They determined these vitamins are necessary. And vitamins, they were vital for life. You can see why, because without them, people died, the animals died. And so they found these vitamins, these minerals, and these amino acids and fatty acids and some carbohydrates. We add them all up together. There are about 43 minerals and molecules required for life. But then there's this kind of assumption that, well, everything else in food was unimportant. So we'll call them unimportant molecules. So then when food started getting, the food supply started getting hybridized and in particular grown chemically, as long as these important molecules were maintained, the fact that other molecules were lost was considered unimportant. Okay. So then when you look at organically grown foods versus chemically grown foods, there are dramatic differences in the molecules in those foods. So the next question you might ask is, well, how many molecules have been lost from the food supply? So the number is unclear, but what we do know is that if you look at plants on the earth, many of which we eat, plants have, at this point, have been discovered to have about 50,000 molecules. It was 1,000 times as many. And researchers think it may go up to 200,000 as the technology becomes more effective at recognizing these molecules. The next question is, okay, well, wow, we decided 99.9% of the molecules in food were unimportant. Could that have a clinical impact? And the answer is definitely yes. So now you start saying, well, so now why do plants produce all these molecules that aren't necessary for them to live either? Well, these molecules are anti-insect, one makes sense, antiviral, anti-cancer, anti-ultraviolet, et cetera, et cetera. So they produce these molecules to maintain their health. And it turns out these molecules in these plants are important for the health of humans as well.
Wow.
So when you remove these molecules from the food supply, which is what we've done, many of these molecules are either dramatically lower, like 9% lower, or they're not even there anymore. Well, it turns out we're way more susceptible to disease. So you hear about phytonutrients and these wonderful what's the term being used? Phytonutrients, so nutraceuticals, things like this. What they are is replacing the molecules that were lost from the food supply. They're only special now because they're not in the food anymore. So, and what's even more interesting is a number of these molecules that have been lost from the food supply are then taken by pharmacologists into laboratories, chemically modified to make them into patentable molecules, which they then prescribe to us to deal with the diseases caused by the loss of these molecules from the food supply.
Wow.
So I'm calling them unimportant molecules facetiously, because it turns out they're incredibly important for health, and yet they're pretty much gone.
Okay, so before we go forward, I didn't do you any justice, because I know that we're kind of like, we're going to finish earlier today, and I want to make sure all of you type in a Q if you have any questions, because this is important information that Dr. Pizzorno is sharing today. Dr. Pizzorno founded Bastyr University, is one of the co-founders of Bastyr University, which helps train other naturopathic doctors. And Dr. Pizzorno is a naturopathic doctor. And so the information that you're getting is right from the teacher of the teachers. And so I'm just really excited, Dr. Pizzorno, that you're here today and that you're sharing this important information. But I've got so many questions for you, because as I was preparing for today, I started thinking about, our food is medicine. And if you're taking half a dose of something, obviously it's not going to be as potent as if you're taking the full dose. And so that's what I felt like, this is a altering of our medication as well, when we are eating food thinking that we're getting all the nutrients that we need. And, many people say, oh, we have all the nutrients that we need. But I'm glad you went back 100 years to talk about how they did these experiments with the animals to see what they needed. But we're not animals. We're not the same as animals. How could they justify taking out nutrients? Why would they do that? I mean, why would they take out the nutrients, test the animals, and of course the animals die and they figure out what they need, but what do we need?
Well, that's a very good question. So in general, many of the nutrients that animals need are similar to what humans need. But surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, many of those nutrients, most people don't realize that many of these things like vitamins and such actually have multiple forms. And a form that may be optimal for an animal is not necessarily optimal for humans.
Correct.
Great example is vitamin E. So everybody knows about alpha tocopherol, okay? So alpha tocopherol was decided to be the only important vitamin E because of research that was done with rats where they were looking at something called fetal reabsorption. Mm-hmm. What happens is if a rat is deficient in alpha tocopherol, the pregnant rat will reabsorb her fetuses.
Miscarriage.
Okay, so they actually decided the way they measure vitamin E content of food was through the fetal reabsorption assay. Well, that's fine, but it's alpha tocopherol. Well, it turns out the other tocopherols are way more important for humans, particularly the gamma tocopherol and the delta tocopherol. And then, of course, you have the tocotrienols. Not only that, but when you then give a high dose of one version of a vitamin, you actually deplete the levels of the other versions of the vitamins because they compete for absorption. So many times they'll say, oh yeah, vitamin E is important for people, and it is. But then they said, now let's use alpha tocopherol. No, it's not the right one. So when you look at the food supply, when properly grown, has all of the versions of the vitamin E. But when you start saying all the other ones aren't important, then when they're lost from the food supply, nobody minds. But what happens is, what you see right now, we have the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever in human history. So what we've done is, not only have we removed these molecules from the food supply that are critical for health, we've replaced them with metals and chemical pollutants into the environment. And so many times you get more of the poison than you are of the nutrient in the food that's being grown commercially now. Now, notice I'm not using the term conventional because I want conventional to become organic. So right now we have chemically grown foods versus organically grown foods. We must grow our food supply organically. Now, if anybody has any question about the importance of this, well, go to the grocery store and buy a chemically grown tomato. Look at it first, it's kind of pale, and then taste it. Yeah, it has a little bit of tomato taste. So what they've done is they've maintained some of the color, some of the taste, so you know it's a tomato. Now go to the grocery store and eat an organic tomato. Whoa, it tastes way better. Mm-hmm. What does taste way better mean? It means it has more molecules your body is recognized and say, oh yeah, we need those. Now let's go one step further. Grow some tomatoes in your backyard organically with heirloom seeds. And now taste those tomatoes. They're even better than the organically grown tomatoes you can buy in the grocery store. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone from where people used to grow a lot of their own food or grow food in communities where they shared it to we're now agribusiness producing these large amounts of these foods very inexpensively. Congratulations, but they're a shadow of what they should be.
So even the organically grown products have less molecules than if we were to grow it. I just bought two raised garden beds.
Oh, good for you.
And I live in a condo, so I don't have a place where I can grow my own in my backyard. Like I've always had a home and I could always grow a backyard. So I just bought, and I'm waiting for the season so that I can start planting. So I'm growing my own seeds. So are the seeds full of every molecule that we need? So if we're growing it, we're getting the intact seed. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Very, very good question, Lily. So let's now look at the seeds themselves.
Yes.
Remember, as part of the agricultural revolution, we have systematically, optimize our seeds for specific purposes. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you want wheat to have more protein in it. Okay, fine. Or you want your fruits to be sweeter or bigger, or you want, whatever it is you want. When you emphasize production of one molecule or one group of molecules, by necessity, all the other molecules have to go down, or at least a number of the other molecules have to go down, because plants can only produce a certain number of molecules. So they're only going to produce the molecules they need. So when you start then picking seeds that have certain characteristics that you want, you've now lost other characteristics. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter a lot, but sometimes it's pretty meaningful. So I'm now recommending to people not only eat organically grown foods, try to grow them as much as you can, and get as old a seed as you can. So they may not be quite as sweet, may not be quite as fancy, but they're going to be even more flavorful because they have all these other molecules that we've lost from the food supply.
Yeah, and I've had these seeds now, I would say 12 years, maybe even longer.
Mhm.
And they're a brand that it produces organic seed. So I'm planning on putting them in egg cartons, add some soil in them so that I can grow from my own seeds as opposed to buying something that's already grown. Is that good?
Sure. Yes. So
Okay.
I'm fortunate. Well, actually, everybody can do this. As you know, I'm in Seattle. Up north of us in Bellingham is a company called Uprising Seeds, and they work really hard to get heirloom seeds. Now, I have no commercial relationship with them, but I buy a lot of my seeds from them. And something I don't always like all of the produce that they produce, but I like a lot of it. And so one thing what I do now, I've been growing my own food now for a few years, is whenever we grow one that we end up really liking, well, we let it go to seed so we can have our own seeds to go forward. And also now we're looking at seeds that are now kind of be optimally growing in our own environment. So they're going to be, just healthier plants and better for us.
And so pretty soon I'll be talking about Pizzorno seeds. And I'll buy those. Okay, so let's go. I've got to go back because this is something that's been brewing in my mind as you're speaking. And it's about animals, dogs. I've had a naturopathic veterinarian here and in the classroom, and she creates her own food for animals. And one of the things that she said that stuck in and that I want to share is that she said that animals, especially dogs, do not adapt. So when an animal receives a toxin, or something is wrong, or they're not getting what they need, the dog will die. They don't adapt like humans do. And how we adapt is we get diabetes, or we get heart disease, or but we can live with the chronic for a long time, but the animals cannot. That's what she explained. And that's how I'm re-explaining. It may be different than what she meant to say, but that's what I understand. So when they're doing this with the animals and the animals die a certain, are they using dogs? What kind of animal are they using?
Okay, we just cover a lot of territory there.
Yeah.
So I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't speak authoritatively about animals, but we do know that animals have been hybridized a lot. I mean, we have hybridized animals a lot. So I would not be surprised if they've lost some of their adaptive ability, but they definitely have some adaptive ability.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the same question.
But they don't live as long, like our dogs don't live as long because they're eating dry food and doesn't have the nutrients that they need. And that's what basically she was saying.
We know a lot about animal husbandry and how to keep animals alive. I think that's really important. I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Well, the question is, when they're giving them this food to them,
I know what you're talking about. So so virtually all of the research on nutrition that's applied to humans is done on rodents. Okay, and
on rodents.
Mice and rats. Mainly because they're just easy to deal with. They reproduce very quickly. There's many species.
But how similar?
There's also many species where they've been hybridized to have specific characteristics. Like some rats will always get diabetes. So you can try various interventions, see if you can prevent them from getting diabetes. So the answer is yes, animals have been hybridized a lot. And some of the hybridizations have resulted in animals that have very, very narrow windows of adaptability. But animals do have adaptability.
Yeah, but with what she was saying is, they're not as adapted as humans.
Not adaptable.
And it's like, like we take pills, and I'm noticing more and more veterinarians are now giving pharmaceutical drugs to animals for depression and anxiety. And I'm thinking they're doing the same thing to animals that they've done to us. And we are buying into it because most of us believe in taking that pill as opposed to taking responsibility. So, okay. So now we talked about the seed. I just had to go back there because it kept mulling it. It's like, how am I similar to that animal? And so you're saying that they're creating the animal to be similar to the human?
Not necessarily. They bring many animals to have diseases that are similar to the diseases in humans, to then check to see what drugs will impact those animals in the ways that they want them to.
Okay, well, still, I mean, I can see how diseases. We're so chronically deficient. And today, especially so we're looking at, there's 3 categories. What I'm understanding you say, there is the conventional, which has lots of chemicals and altered seeds and GMO and pesticides. Then you have organics, and those organics are better than the conventional,
yes.
but homegrown, because they're cutting corners even with organic. Is that what I'm hearing you say? They're cutting corners.
So I would, that's kind of pejorative. I would say more. So if you're going to be selling some produce in a grocery store, well, it's going to have to be shipped, and it's going to have to stay there for a little while. So they're tending to choose varieties of seeds that will last longer.
Got it.
Okay, which makes sense. But also, and they have to pick them a little before they're fully ripe, so they can travel. So at home, I can tell you, we eat our food right when it's ripe, wherever we can. I can also say most of the food when you put in the refrigerator, it only lasts like 3 or 4 days. When you go to get the organically grown foods, it'll last you a week or longer. So the foods they're choosing for good commercial reasons, they're more stable, which means you're sacrificing something to get the more stable food.
Got it. And so by us growing our foods, we're getting it right there from the vine. We don't have to pluck it before it gets ripe, because they have to travel and everything. And I understand that is it tomato that they inject certain gas in it so that they turn red? Is that?
So there are many examples of where chemicals are used either by injection or by spraying the foods to make them last longer, have better color, whatever the case may be.
Okay. So now we've talked about seeds and how important it is that the seed be an organic seed, an older seed, and you had recommended uprising seeds. I have a different kind of seeds, but I'm going to look them up to see, because I am now going to start my own garden. And so like I said, I just started. Now, the next question is soil. How important, because I bought organic soil for my organic garden bed. So what can you say about that? Are there any molecules missing that we need to be aware of?
So keep nurturing your soil. So one of the things we do is we compost our garden, our kitchen waste. So we have a couple of these composters that roll, you might say. We have 2 of them because it takes us about 6 months to fill up one compost, and then while that's cooking, we then fill the other one. So the more you can add to your own soil by compost from your kitchen, you'll just continue to build the strength of that soil. And it's been fascinating myself watching how sometimes I have trouble keeping too many insects from eating too much of my food, things like this. But I've noticed as the soil has gotten healthier and as I've learned better how to take care of things, I have so much less problems with insects. It is just surprising. I should show you our Swiss chard, for example. It is gorgeous. There's no pesticides, even natural pesticides. We just make them really healthy by having really healthy soil.
I'm coming over to eat at your house.
Well, you're welcome anytime you're in Seattle.
It's going to be a while, but okay. So
let me go a little further. So last year, for the first time, I planted black raspberries. Okay, and I did black raspberries because the more color means it's got more of these really healthy molecules in it. I can tell you that eating the black raspberry right off the vine has a certain flavor to it. Even being in the refrigerator for 1 day is enough to change the flavor of the raspberry. You can't get it. You can't get it from store-bought. You've got to take it right off the vine. And one of the things I want to look into, I just haven't had a chance. There's some interesting molecules that are only found in raspberries that have very potent anti-cancer capabilities. I'm thinking to myself, could it be that particular molecule is really volatile and really delicate and it gets lost right away? Anyway, it's some of the things one of my curiosities.
Well, I think it's great to be curious. Okay, so you talked about compost, and there's probably going to be someone listening and going, "Comp what?" So we're going to talk about what is compost and how do you create it. And someone like me that lives in a high rise, how do I create my own compost without stinking up my house?
Yes, that's a very good question. So first off, in the house, we have a little stainless steel container with a carbon filter air holes on top. So everything just goes in from the kitchen, and it'll take us typically 2 to 3 days to fill it up. Then I take over the compost. Now in the compost, you can't just do kitchen waste because it'll get really, really smelly.
Yeah.
I know all about that. Okay. So you have to have at least half leaves or other dry brown matter. So as long as you've got enough dry brown matter, compost doesn't smell.
Dry
So
brown matter. What is that? Can you buy
so
that?
things like leaves.
Okay.
Leaves, straw, things of this nature. So if you can't have access to safe leaves, by the way, so don't create leaves taken from trees that have been sprayed. Okay.
Yeah.
So on my own property now, I'm able to get leaves from when, like when the cherry tree starts losing its leaves and things like that. Well, I save them, and I save them in the garage. And then throughout the year, as we put kitchen matter in, I then add periodically some more leaves to it.
Is it possible to get the effects of compost by buying it?
Sure.
Can you buy compost?
You can buy a lot of healthy compost. As a matter of fact, you should always bring in some fertilizer from outside just to make sure you're putting into your system more healthy molecules for the plants to grow on.
Outside from where?
So organic fertilizer is available. So I periodically put organic fertilizer. I would say I probably do organic fertilizer like every 3 years, probably. And then the rest of the time I just put in our kitchen recycling, our kitchen compost.
Okay. Yeah. I just, because I had Dr. Joel Furman, and I laugh every time I say this, but he is an avid he can grow anything. He has a green thumb, and he has an incredible garden. But then he starts talking about, you get bat guano. And I'm like, you lost me at bat guano. Yeah. And so, but I would like to make it simple. And so I bought some organic soil, but I know that soil may not have exactly what the fruits and vegetables need as we're putting them together, as we put it out. And I want it to be nutritious as well, because isn't the soil what dictates what the seeds, the molecules of the seeds will have? It
plays a huge role. And let me give some more examples of that. So people know about glyphosate, and they're worried about glyphosate. And one reason why glyphosate has been so freely used is because the direct human toxicity from glyphosate is not that high. I mean, there's definitely some there. Let me be clear, I'm not saying it's healthy for people, but here's the way that glyphosate causes trouble. Sure, you can GMO grow plants that are resistant to glyphosate. Glyphosate poisons something called the shikimic pathway. And so they create plants that don't depend upon the shikimic pathway, whereas other plants do. Well, the shikimic pathway, they said, it's not very important. Well, it turns out when you poison the shikimic pathway, you decrease the production of these other molecules, like polyphenols. Everybody knows how wonderful the polyphenols are and things like that. Well, plants have trouble growing those things when they're around glyphosate. So it's an example that how you treat the soil has a huge impact. Another example is tilling the soil. You've probably read a lot of them saying, well, you got to till your soil, which means turn it over. When you till the soil, you break up the microbiome of the soil. And when plants are grown on them, they produce less of these other molecules. It is just
so you should not till the soil?
You should not till the soil. That was, to me, a big surprise, because I'd always told myself until last year I read this article. And by the way, I have an organic gardener, so he takes care of our non-food parts of the property. First off, our properties never look better because all the plants, everything is just so much healthier. But he saw me tilling my garden, my vegetable garden. He says, Joe, stop doing that. I said, well, why? He says, well, it makes the soil less healthy. I said, boy, that's not what I thought. Yeah. But I said, okay, I'll follow your guidance. And then a year ago, I found the study. He was right. You shouldn't till the soil.
Wow, amazing.
The microbiome of the soil is critical.
Wow. And so I would love to just do, because I need to start growing my seeds, and I need to figure out what works for the fall and what works for the springtime or the wintertime or whatever, because we have perpetual springtime or summer in Florida. So I just want to make sure that what I grow, especially, I want it to be a healthy soil, and I want our vegetables to be healthier. I see what's happening to our food supply. So I do want to ask some questions regarding, and I know you guys have questions and I see them there, and I will ask in a second. Okay. What about these hydroponics, organic hydroponic plants? What do you have to say about that?
So to me, it's a big question mark. And the reason for that is I think there's a lot that happens in the soil, the microbiome and such that is important for the plants. So I suspect this may be one of the situations where they've tested those plants for the important molecules.
Yes.
Now, please test them for the unimportant molecules. And until that happens, I don't know.
So
I would suspect they're lowering the unimportant molecules, to tell you the truth.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask some questions because we're not going to have a teacher's pet corner. So I want to make sure I get all your questions as well. So we have a question is, I often wonder if pet kibble is really sufficient to nurture my pets' stomachs. What do you say about, well, you did say you're not a vet and
You're right.
yeah.
Well, the further the food you're feeding the animal is from the food the animal will be eating in the wild is the degree to which you're likely not giving the animal the optimal nutrition for it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that why we need to grow our own food, I hope that you asked that question before Dr. Pizzorno mentioned that when we grow our foods, we're not taking shortcuts like they do in the mass productions, right? Did I get that correct? Okay.
And again, you're saying shortcuts. I just want to say the realities of what's required for the food supply is they can't have foods that perish too easily or it can't get to the marketplace.
That's right. I mean, how long does fruits and vegetables, how long do they travel before they get to their supermarket?
Right. So another reason why eating locally is beneficial because you're less likely to have the food deteriorate.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so Kim has lots of questions. So she wants to know where you can get a good seeds. You had mentioned the uprising seeds. Are there, like I've got Bubbies, and I think that's what I have, and they're organic seeds. Are there others? Is it if it has the label organic?
Yeah, there are many sources for them. And so I'd say just try them out and see if they've got the food that you like. And if you don't like the food, fine, try somebody else.
Yes. And make sure it's organic. So Rosalinda wants to know, can I use lawn clippings to add to compost? There is no pesticides used, but weeds get mowed up too.
So the answer is yes, you can. Okay, it's best to let it dry out first because then you can use some of your brown matter. But also realize that if it does have weed seeds in it, when you put in your garden, those weeds will grow. Okay, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but just realize that you will have that added complication.
A long time ago, I had this naturopath come on to the classroom. He I think he had a nervous breakdown and he lived in the woods for a while. I'm trying to now I'm going deep into my memory here, but he wrote a book on weeds that are edible. And Certainly. He was saying that he survived on weeds and he survived on the trees. And so he wrote a book that had, I maybe have him back. He wrote a book that was on, what are some of the weeds that are healthier for us? What are some of the things that are growing in the middle of our sidewalk that he says that there should be no one hungry because there's so many nutrients out in the wild. Just go and eat certain things. So I think I have to I was talking to my husband about this the other day and I was saying, I need to pull that book because now I'm curious. Now that the food supply is being threatened in different ways, and I don't want to go into a lot of that right now because I want to be able to play this on Facebook and YouTube. Now that it's being altered and everything, I'm more interested in eating from nature. And, I'm just very curious about that. Can you add anything to that?
So what is a weed? A weed is a plant that we don't want. Okay. But that plant got all kinds of nutrients in it. And of course, make sure some of those plants are poisonous, which is why we don't eat them. Okay. Yeah. But there's going to be a lot. And you eat the weed, it's going to taste very different from the food you normally eat. Tastes different. What's that mean? It means it has different molecules in it. So my wife and I now, whenever we're able to find a new plant, we say, oh, great, new taste. That means new molecules. That'll probably help our body out. And we didn't get into this, but I can easily start diving into biochemistry about all these things these other molecules do in our body that are just so important. So we're on a search. We're always looking for new molecules.
Oh, that is so cool that when you can share that with your spouse
Mhm.
and be curious together and be excited. And so I just want to take a little moment to acknowledge, that we do have websites and we do want to continue growing our platform. And so I want to encourage you guys to go to whenyouneedafriend.com. Please, while you're there, become a subscriber and like and follow me and all my social media, including Odyssey and BitChute, that are not censoring the classroom. And so I want to encourage you to go to my sponsor, Dr. Jennifer Grameth, ND. She's also a naturopathic doctor. And I also want to encourage you to check out my Shop Now bag. These are all healthy options for our body, from makeup, from head to toe, non-chemicals, non-toxic, all organic, all the way to how to heal your body with microcurrent technology. So there's a bunch of different things, and whenever you buy from that, it helps the classroom grow. Or you can become a enrolled student in the classroom. You can donate from $1 to $1,000, whatever you want to give monthly, whatever you can give, time, talent, or treasure. We are very grateful for that, because now we have changed our model to rely on the generosity of the people. So if you don't have if you're looking for places to tithe, please consider the classroom as a place that you can donate your money. Dr. Pizzorno, you can find him at drpizzorno.com so that you can learn. How many books do you have now, Dr. Pizzorno? How many books have you written?
Oh, this new book, this will be book 14. So my wife and I have just written a new book called Healthy Bones, Healthy You, which will be out shortly. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be number 14. So where am I? I'm now at 8 consumer books and 6 textbooks.
Wow. Wow. And of course, Dr. Pizzorno, if you're tuning in just now, Dr. Pizzorno teaches the teachers, the doctors, the naturopathic doctors. He's a co-founder of Bastyr University, and it's a naturopathic. Can you share a little bit of Bastyr?
Sure. So thanks for your kind compliment about teaching the doctors. And I do. I basically teach doctors literally all over the world. Up until COVID, I was travel about 100,000 miles.
You look so different now that you're not traveling.
Oh, I know. I feel so much better. I have to say, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
So, so I teach doctors all over the world. Actually, I teach more medical doctors these days than I do naturopathic doctors.
That's great. I think doctors are seeing the light.
More and more of them are seeing the light. So Bastyr University is the University of Natural Medicine. So I created Bastyr to teach naturopathic medicine as the core, and also nutrition and herbal medicine and acupuncture and counseling and kind of all these ways in which we help nurture people to be healthier.
Yes, absolutely. And so you guys can, like I said, we can research and we can learn. We don't have to say yes to something that your doctor only has, because if you only have a hammer, everything is a nail. So you want to go to someone who has a variety, a bunch of tools in their toolbox, and because one size does not fit all. So I want to encourage you to check out drpizzorno.com. And also with the Toxin Solution, can you share a little bit about how you have ways to help people detoxify their body?
Sure. So as I mentioned, when I'm lecturing all over the world, I'm basically telling doctors that according to the most current research, the primary driver of most chronic disease are the metals and chemicals that have polluted our environment. So it's easy to say, okay, well, I want to avoid them and I want to detox my body. And I tell people, yes, you need to avoid these as carefully as you can. But before you start detoxification, you have to make sure that your organs of elimination are functioning properly. Mm-hmm. So we got to go through and get the gut working properly, get the liver working properly, get the kidneys working properly. And once everything's working properly, now you go on a detox program. Mm-hmm. So I show people in that book how to do this. And I talk about case histories. And I'm honest about it too. I talk about, I've been involved in medicine now for literally over half a century. So I first started seeing patients way back in 1975.
Wow.
I had a lot of learning to do. So I talk about some of the therapies I use, and I learned from my patients, whoops, that didn't work the way it was supposed to. Mm-hmm. And so step by step, you can see how I learned that you can't just detoxify people. You first have to prepare them for detoxification and then do detoxification. And when you do that, you get a lot of benefit. And when we think about toxins, you have to break them into 2 categories. while people will say metals versus chemicals, a better way of looking at it is persistent versus non-persistent. So non-persistent means our bodies can get rid of them pretty easily. So stop being exposed, you'd be better. So for example, bisphenol A, BPA,
Plastic.
non-persistent. Avoid it. Within a few days, your body's got rid of it. But then we got the persistence. There's things like DDT. You might say, wait a minute, DDT was banned almost 50 years ago. Yes, it was. But it is a persistent toxin. Very hard to get out of the body. And you look at PCBs. They were also banned almost 50 years ago. Very hard to get out of the body. The half-life, how long it takes to get rid of like half of a PCB? Some PCBs are as little as 2 years. Some are 20 years. So once you get that into your body, it takes 4 half-lives to get rid of it. So you can eat a PCB in farmed fish, for example, and it'll take you 80 years to get rid of it. So you've got to not only, you got to avoid these toxins. That's all I can say.
So
avoid the toxins as much as
So I'm
possible.
hearing you say that PCBs are in farmed fish.
Now, well, farm fish is a source of PCBs, yes.
Wow. So do not get any farmed fish. Never, ever,
Wild caught.
ever.
Small wild-caught fish. If you're going to eat fish, it must be small wild-caught.
Small wild caught. Okay.
Now, you can do organically grown fish, and they're kind of halfway between wild-caught and chemically grown fish.
Yeah.
So they're not as good as wild-caught. They are better than the regular farmed.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I have a question. Living in Canada with Canadian winters, any suggestions on how to grow indoors?
Ah, great. So
Great
I'm learning.
question.
Yes, I'm learning. Very good question. So I now have a greenhouse, and I'm learning how to grow during the winter without spending too much money on energy. So you can do it. You can get grow lights, and more natural spectrum, the better. And you can get heaters. But it's not easy, but it can be done. And I'm still learning how to do it. So don't look to me. There's people who are expert in this. They'll give you lots of guidance.
Yes. Yeah. The day you find yourself saying bat guano, that you're going to put bat guano in your soil, you're an expert. So, okay. So I have another question. It says, should I be worried about aerosols from planes when growing foods in the city?
So when you're growing foods in the city, there's the big problem that is cities have more pollution than out in the countryside. So yes, you should try to avoid pollution as much as possible. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think it's more important to grow the foods, even though the air may not be as clean as you want, because the foods will still be much, much better.
Okay. That's and we don't know where our food comes from. There could be lots of pesticides from the environment. And I heard that, was it like 80% of our water, our rainwater, has glyphosate? Do you know the actual quote for that?
Don't know, haven't looked at it, but I know,
Okay.
we have huge amounts of glyphosate in the environment.
Yeah.
I mean, even myself, I measure my glyphosate levels, and they're definitely not zero. It's frustrating. If you look at research looking at people eating organically grown foods versus conventionally grown foods or chemically grown foods, their glyphosate levels are about 1/3 of those eating the chemically grown foods. So even us being careful about organics, there's so much glyphosate in the environment, it's still affecting us.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have another question. How do you feel about town water and its additives when homegrown food? And I was going to ask you that question about the water. How do I water? Do I let the rain water my plants, or do I actually take filtered water to water my plants?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say you need to actually measure your water in the city to see how clean it is. I'm fortunate in that here in Seattle, our water supply is pretty clean, so I'm not worried about filtering it.
Yeah, they have
But there are
fluoride in the water in Florida.
Well, there's fluorides here too. I'm not
Oh.
worried. I'm not worried about that for the plants. There's
Okay.
other stuff in the water supply like arsenic that's way more problematic. But you have to realize that you must test for your arsenic levels, because the arsenic will go into the plants. And a lot of the water supplies in the United States are contaminated with arsenic. 10% of the public water supplies that have reported their their arsenic levels in the water have arsenic levels known to induce disease in humans. So if you're growing your food with that water, it's not going to be good for you. And then there are a lot of wells that are contaminated with arsenic.
Oh, geez. Okay. So how do you test your arsenic levels?
So there's labs that'll do that.
Okay. And there's labs. There's not a particular name of a lab, or just say, I want to test my arsenic levels.
So the lab I use for metal testing is Doctor's Data. Okay. So I believe they're still doing water samples, but you'd have to check with them.
Okay.
But the number, so it's 10 micrograms of arsenic per liter of water. So liter is about 1.1 quarts, is the threshold for which you start seeing significant increase in disease in humans. Now, some people have genetics. It's only about 1% of the population, so that they're more susceptible to the damage at lower levels. But for the majority of the population, tends to cut off. So if you've got water supply with higher levels than that, it's worrisome. I'm doing a wellness, natural wellness program in Flint, Michigan. Everybody knows about the lead problems there. Well, I just pulled up a study done by the Michigan water authorities that shows that 43% of the drinking water in Flint is above the threshold of arsenic toxicity. So I think arsenic is actually worse than lead. So I'm trying to deal with that now.
Oh no. Okay. And it's, it's just important to just test it. If I water my plants, I'll probably water my plants with reverse osmosis, and that doesn't have any minerals. So then do I have to add minerals from the water that are not there? Should I put some salt in them? Or what should I do?
Yes, you should get the minerals. No question about it.
What minerals
The
can I
reverse
get?
osmosis, well, we'll get rid of the arsenic, which is great. It gets rid of everything.
I know. So what kind of
plants
what kind of minerals can I put in them?
So rather than looking at kind of a synthetic mineral supply, I would just look for fertilizers that have a lot of minerals in them. So alfalfa seed is considered to have high minerals. I don't know how true that is. Fish meal will have minerals in it. There are a lot of sources you can use. This requires doing some work.
Very good. Wow. This is like mind blowing. Okay. Now I did, as I was going through all of this and preparing for today, I thought there is, and I don't know if this is a marketing campaign or what your opinion is or your research has shown, but there is something called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And so I've kind of like whenever I can't get organic, like I have a little grocery store right around the corner from me that way, that is all organic. Everything they have is organic, and it's not a chain, it's a co-op. And so that's where I get my most of my vegetables. But when I can't find it there, I might get, like, for example, the Clean 15, avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, cabbages, onions, sweet peas, papayas, asparagus, mangoes, eggplants, honeydews, kiwis, cantaloupes, cauliflower, and broccoli. I don't know if that's a Clean 15 list, of how modernized or how updated that is. But if I can't find it, so I kind of like say, okay, well then I don't have to worry about having organic broccoli, but I'll buy it like frozen organic broccoli. So can I kind of relax from the commercial and get something like that, or not?
Right. So another very good question. No question that organically grown foods are more expensive and can be less available. Mm-hmm. So the good thing that the Environmental Working Group did was try to determine which of the foods are most contaminated with these pesticides and which are least contaminated. Mm-hmm. In general, the thicker the skin, the more resistant it's going to be, and you can wash the stuff off. Mm-hmm. So, for example, dilute vinegar, dilute vitamin C, dilute radish juice, interestingly enough, will actually wash off most of these things pretty effectively. Tap water is not very effective, but these slightly acidic waters are pretty effective. And then now
when you say diluted vinegar water, right, what's the dilution?
Well, they typically use like a 5 to 10% solution.
Okay. And that's like 1 cup to a tablespoon, or how does that?
So if you've got a quart, for example, a quart's 32 ounces. So you put in around 3 ounces of the vinegar. It should do the job.
Perfect. I love measurements like that. 10% solution. I'm going, what? Okay. So go ahead. Keep going.
But
so
then
the thicker,
the softer fruits, the softer fruits, the unfortunate pesticides penetrate more deeply. So it's be more problematic.
Okay. So with the softer fruits, like the Dirty Dozen, strawberries, spinach, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, potatoes, sweet bell peppers. But I just go bell peppers, period. Right?
So, my own approach is I try to not eat foods that are not organically grown. I'll only eat foods that are organic. Maybe say positive. I try to only eat organically grown foods, period.
So my next question is, like I'll have Dr. Lorraine Day that says, you can't freeze something and get the same benefit of it. But many of the claim to fame of these frozen broccoli, frozen organic things that is that this frozen fresh. And I've had many people say that it's better than the actual, if you go to the grocery store. Any difference of opinion? What do you say about that?
That's a very good question, and something I've actually been trying to figure out myself, because of course I try to look at the research, and I'd say it's unclear. So I'm quite confident buying organically grown foods that are frozen, and I do that a fair amount if I can't get something that's fresh and local. So it's easy to get distracted by the nuances. Yeah. You got to do the big stuff. You do the big stuff, you're generally going to be okay. Don't worry about the nuances. If the only way you can get organically grown foods is going to be by frozen, great, do that. Okay, if you can get fresh, organically grown foods from a local farmer, well, that's pretty nice, actually. If you just, there's something called, what's the term for it? We can actually subscribe to a
co-op
farm share.
Yes.
Subscribe to a farmer and say, okay, you're for X number of dollars a month, you can give us a certain percent of your produce every month. And we've done that in the past before we start growing our own food, and that worked great. No, and it had a disadvantage. And sometimes they have a lot of the foods that we just didn't like. Yeah. For example, garlic makes me sick. So, sometimes, garlic's out right now, and a third of what you're getting is garlic. Okay, well, we've got to throw that third away.
It's funny. I just read an article that said that garlic is not really good for you because it's an antibacterial or antimicrobial. I don't know, but it kills your good and bad bacteria in your stomach. And so that's what I like. When I get a sore throat, I suck on garlic, and I apologize to everybody around me. The vampires away from me, but my sore throat is gone within 24 hours. Oh,
garlic is a very good antimicrobial agent, but you have to make sure that you can detoxify the sulfur compounds. And I'm one of those people where I can't detoxify the sulfur compounds in garlic, and it makes me sick.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me get to, we got 2 minutes of questions or 2 minutes of music. We're not going to have Teacher's Pet Corner, but I'm so sorry we didn't get to your questions, but I'm definitely going to have Dr. Pizzorno. Will you come back and help us grow our own garden?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that.
I don't know if this is practical. Might be kind of fun to walk around with the camera and just kind of show you my garden and show you the things that I've done.
I would love to do that.
Over here at my beautiful apple trees.
Yes, so we can do that. Go ahead.
You can get this fine netting to go around the apple tree to keep the moths out, so you don't lay things on your apples, and so now your apples don't have all these worms and things. Well,
I'm going to have to do something. I'll have to pick your brain once I get my garden up and running, because I live on the water, and we have lots of seabirds that love to kind of hang out in my porch.
Birds are a challenge.
Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to hear you say.
I don't mind sharing, but I don't like when they take everything.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's right. Okay. So everybody, I had mentioned that we're not going to have a Teacher's Pet Corner. So I thank you for asking your questions today. I also want to thank Dr. Pizzorno. Again, his website is drpizzorno.com. He's going to be coming back pretty soon because he's releasing a book on or bone health with his wife. And so the two of them will come back. And then I also want to do the gardening, how to do the garden. We can have you walk around and give us tips on what to do, because I want to start growing my own food. That's going to be the next chapter in my life. Yeah. And I appreciate anything that you can do to help us do that. So awesome. And so if there's any questions that you have that we didn't ask, then what I'll do is I will ask it next time Dr. Pizzorno is on. So ask your questions and I'll go back to this. So put it in the comment section, and I'll ask it next time Dr. Pizzorno is in the classroom. But I'm really excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to research these unimportant molecules that are very important in our life. And that has given me another boost to grow my own garden. So thank you, Dr. Pizzorno. I really do appreciate you. And all of you, remember, it's not just the one thing you do or the big thing you do. It's the many little things that you do that make a difference in your life. And so I hope that this has been very helpful to you. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott, Dr. Joe Pizzorno, wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve